Shares tactical, often unfiltered advice on building unique stays that stand out from domes and tiny homes to containers and boutique cabins.
Literally cashing between $30,000 to $60,000 in checks.
Welcome to the Radical Hospitality Show. I've got an incredible guest on today. I'm very excited to be welcoming Kai Andrew. He's a real estate investor, developer, short-term rental builder, and really one of the best influencers on the YouTube space. Just does an incredible job of teaching short-term rental in a practical and really deep dive way. He's known for innovative and unconventional approach to hospitality and income generating properties. He's got a large and fast growing audience on YouTube and Instagram. He shares tactical, often unfiltered advice on building unique stays that stand out from domes and tiny homes to containers and boutique cabins. His approach fuses really great architecture, which we're passionate about, and the short-term rental business. He's different in that he really focuses on the development strategy versus just buying and building more and more like co-hosting or rentals. He's focused on building out, great projects. That's inspiring to me. It's inspiring to a lot of hosts out there in the real estate world. So Kai, thanks for coming on to the Radical Hospitality Show and spending some time with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. That's quite the intro. Thanks, man.
So you're kind of known as the guy that's like building outside the box. How did you get into this space, and what was kind of your realization like this is space for you to build unique stays?
Yeah. I got started, I think with most people reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This was 21, 22 years ago. And I got started with just traditional real estate. I think at the time I was 22, 23 years old, and I was getting into my second rental. And I realized it wasn't sustainable. And this was in 2008, 2007, 2008. And we just kicked off the Great Recession. And at that point in time, I was watching the Super Bowl with just me and my buddy inside his condo. He was my next door neighbor, and an ad came up for HomeAway. And I was traveling a lot for work, and I had this really, really nice kind of like penthouse style condo in the middle of like the downtown Portland. And at the time was the most beautiful area of Portland. Decided to give it a shot. I knew I needed to be different. I have a business background degree. I was working with startups, so that was a big piece of me differentiating your value and what you deliver to customers. And so my thing was, you got the whole property, and it was hyper luxury. Nobody in the market was doing that at that time. Again, this is back in 2008. This is before Airbnb, and it crushed it. And so from that moment on, from 2008, 2009, basically it was like kind of like printing money. It was the wild, wild west though. It's hard to do that these days. But that was when I realized that long-term rentals was the traditional way of investing was not the only way of investing in real estate. And I somehow, with sheer luck, figured out or found short-term rentals where I was literally making what I'd make in 1 month with one condo would take me probably a decade with probably 50 long-term rental units. I was literally cashing between $30,000 to $60,000 in checks. It was just insane at that time. But yeah, that's how I got started. And then it just kind of grew from there over the decades, and all the way to development, building shipping container homes, dome homes, cabins, just like what you said.
Yeah. So did you build up a portfolio of condos and that sort of thing first?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, both fortunately and unfortunately.
Yeah. Did you end up selling
Unfortunately,
those out?
what's
Or do you
that?
still have, did you end up selling those off, or do you still
Yes, I
operate those?
did, which was both good and bad. At the time, it was because I was on the LTR, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, kind of like the traditional trajectory. And so I was just trying to buy up what I could buy. And at that time, I could only afford condos, townhomes at that time. I couldn't afford a single family home. The problem with it, though, is that they're all in HOAs. And if you guys all know this, HOAs, I shouldn't say all of them. The vast majority of HOAs are very prohibitive to what you want to do. And it's usually run by people that don't have a lot of stuff going on in their lives, from what I've experienced. So what ends up happening is that HOAs tend to grow significantly over time. It actually outpaces inflation a lot of times because it's mismanaged funds. So it was hurting cash flows. It was also limiting on what I could do in terms of renting. Even long-term rent, you had to get onto a wait list. And so a lot of times the properties just weren't producing. And then actually condos, a lot of people don't know this, but condos actually they not only can hold flat in value, but they can actually decrease in value. So that same condo that I was telling you about, that was like this penthouse, beautiful condo, brand new construction, getting $500 to $700 a night. After I sold it, the value actually went down by about 15%. And I sold that 11 years ago. So
It seems like the lower hanging fruit of like buying condos and short term rentals has kind of petered out, and the doing a little bit harder, a little bit larger projects seem to be where we're seeing a lot of our clients come in. And one of the things that I think you've done pretty uniquely is kind of this philosophy around like land hacking.
yeah.
When you pivoted into doing your first land hack, what did that take, and what was that project that you began to work on?
Yeah, I'm actually sitting in it right now. This was the first one. So this is a shipping container home that I built. This is one of 5 units on this property. Um, Again, it was by accident, and at that time we were doing property management and rehabs at that time too. So this is back in 2013, 2014. The portfolio was doing really, really well. We had about maybe 11 doors underneath our umbrella. That includes, we also did, at the time, we didn't even have a name for it. It was arbitrage. And so basically we'd go to our friends and family members who had really nice homes that met our criteria. And we're like, hey, I'll pay you a flat $3,000 a month. You let me take this over, and then I can short-term rent it out, basically. And then we'd rent it out for $5, 6, 7, 8, 9, $10,000 a month. And then I realized that it was getting really saturated. A lot of ordinances were coming in, especially on the West Coast, across the cities, which naturally normally happens. And I was like, I need to get outside of the city. And I found this piece of property. It was bank owned. It was just too good to let go. Long story short, it had issues with it. Bank owned. Recently sold for it was like 345, 365, and I was able to get it for 90,000. 7 acres. And from there, I started building from the ground up, really unique structures. And originally I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to put like a really cool shipping container here just to rent out, and also live in, but rent out one space for STRs. This is back in 2014, 2015. And hopefully it'll pay my taxes. That's what I was thinking. Lo and behold, it became one of, if not the best rental, in the area, outside of Portland metro area. And that uncovered and unlocked something totally new, where I realized that people weren't just trying to get to the city, they were actually trying to have an experience. And that launched into land hacking and exploring unique rentals outside the city. And just for the folks that aren't familiar with it, when STRs first started, you needed to be inside the city to make any money. If you're in the suburbs, if you're outside the country, you made $0. Nobody was traveling outside the city. Everybody wanted to be inside the city. That's why my first condo did so well. And so I was kind of going against the grain, doing something different. And that's why I only thought I was going to be able to make a couple $100 to maybe $1,000 a month just to pay my property taxes. But I quickly 10x that when I realized that there was a demand for unique rentals. And that.
How did you finance that? It's probably getting a little bit more prevalent today,
Yeah.
With underwriting on short-term rentals. But in the beginning, it was probably a little harder. And then it sounds like you did it over time, which
Yeah.
also sounds more difficult, versus one proposed project and, master plan and one loan. How did you finance that over time, or did you pay cash to
Yeah.
build
So
it out?
what I did in the beginning, and usually with our folks that we work with, I did it differently because as you grow and you expand, things shift, right? So at that time, again, 12 years ago, I didn't have the financial background that I have now, or the financial, the baseline that I have now. So I built this structure myself. So I negotiated all the contracts. I negotiated the supplies. I went to the lumber yards, the steel yards. I basically negotiated everything I could to try to make sure the materials was as low as possible. So I built it out myself. And then I then did a refi afterwards. So, I talk about numbers in my videos, and I haven't talked about this one in a couple of years. So let me see if I remember it. So I think the land was 90,000. I put 250 into the first 2 doors. It was like 250, maybe 275. And then it was instantly valued at right around 650, 700. I then continued to expand on the property. And then we had an appraiser come in, and I did a cash out refi at a valuation of 1.3. So I was able to increase the equity a significant amount by a significant amount by doing a lot of the work myself. And at this time, the shipping containers, the domes, the decks, and everything that I've done, those were all contracted out because at that time I was able to use the money from the equity created, get that refi back, and then expand on the property to create even more equity and more income streams. Nowadays, I don't have the time to do that anymore. But for folks who are starting off young, hungry, and you're able-bodied, I mean, it's a great way to learn. By no means I was an expert. I've done a couple of remodels, rehabs, nothing spectacular, and I just kind of learned from the ground up.
How many times did you do refinance? To just once and then build
Well,
up?
technically twice. So I did a HELOC at first. Well, actually, sorry. No, we did two HELOCs. So home equity line of credits. And then we did, when I realized in 2022, we locked it in at 2.75%. I just looked at my friends and I looked around. And I was like, the interest rates are never going to go get this low again. And so I was like, let's try refi as high as we can. My good friends and my partners that I trusted a lot, they're like, dude, don't get too crazy. Because I had multiple properties. I was like, I can do this with every property at 2.75%. They're like, don't over leverage yourself. And then I backed off and I only did it with this one property. But now looking back at it, I wish I'd done it with all of them. So,
Yeah. So how would you do it different now if you were to approach a similar type of project versus what you did then?
yeah. So if I had to do it, it'd be different if I'm buying raw land or if I'm buying a piece of property that has structure and utilities already on site. So if it's raw land, you really do need to have either cash or cash equivalent. So what I mean by that is cash is obviously cash in the bank. Cash equivalent is something like a HELOC, a home equity line of credit that's tied to another home, or a refi that you've done on another home. That's what I mean by cash. So there's different ways of having that liquidity with raw land. If you get a construction loan, I would have gone that route. But with a construction loan, you have to have a qualified, licensed, and bonded GC, which makes it difficult for some folks because they're trying to save money, and the GC is going to, they're going to charge you between 20 to 25% on top of whatever the labor and the material prices are. So that prices out a lot of folks. Then the other side is if you buy a property that already has an existing structure and utilities, you actually save a ton of time. And if it's your first property, or even if it's your second or third property, you can get conventional financing on it. And that is actually really good. Conventional financing is by far one of the best terms, if not the best terms in the marketplace. If investors could get conventional financing, they would do it all day long, but they just can't. So they use DSCR loans, they have to use SBAs. I know you're going through something like that right now, and investment grade type of money, like hard money, that type of stuff. But that's how I would approach the investment side, the financing side. If I'm doing new construction, I make sure I have a lot of cash, and then I would explore construction loans. If I'm going to find a property with structured utilities already on it, I can fast track things, and then I would just buy that with a conventional loan. And then I would make sure that I either have some cash or use a bridge loan or use a rehab loan to update the property. The key thing here is that I never buy turnkey, and I would never recommend buying turnkey. When you buy turnkey, I explained this to, I actually literally just had this conversation last night's class, is that we had a member of ours who was asking about, she couldn't find any good deals that are turnkey. And I was like, because you're paying premium for turnkey. And usually that premium nets you maybe a 2 to 5% return, maybe. Very rarely do you see something just cash flow right out the gate. That's why most LTRs don't cash flow out the gate unless you put down like 5% down, right? There's no way you get an LTR to cash flow if you put less than 20% down. It's the same thing with short-term rentals now. We're in this mature market, so you have to do something different. That's a long answer, but hopefully that makes sense.
So what are you currently working on or looking for these days in your portfolio of projects?
Yeah. So right now I've got, I got 4 projects that are going on right now. So this property we have, like I said, we have 5 doors. Well, technically 5 doors. We've got a dome that's a gym, wellness center, and then we have a separate sauna. I'm pointing at it. I was just literally just in there before I came onto the podcast. That we're finishing up. So it's ready for me to use, but not ready for client facing. So we're buttoning that up hopefully it's June 19th. So we're buttoning up this month. We've got the units down. We've got 4 units down in Portland that we just got permits for. That's a whole nother story. Usually I stay away from the cities, but this was just such a unique case. I was able to buy it for less than what the owners bought it for back in 2019. It was just too good of a deal. And I was able to get the permits to basically secure short-term rentals in that area. So nobody else can have a short-term rental within, I believe, It's a 7 block radius of me, 7 or 8 block radius of me. So basically, I own that whole that whole little block that has all the restaurants in it. So we've got 4 units there that we're doing a complete remodel. Actually, after this podcast, I got to head over there and meet with some contractors. We're wrapping things up, and then hopefully we'll get it listed by July 1st. And then we have an Austin property, which is the Earth Home, which we literally just Tuesday finished the pool and the hot tub and outdoor area. And then we're starting to put in a pickleball court, sauna, gym, and a wellness area. And then we're turning it into a place where we can have micro weddings and micro retreats. And then my partner, Rob, we just helped him go, speaking of what you're going through, the SBA, close on what we call a landscape hotel in Texas, Hill Country, Texas as well. So that has currently with 10 units going in. So it's kind of a big project for us right now.
Yeah, no, that's great. I like the starting with, you're mentioning it's hard to find something that is turnkey, but that maybe starting with 10 units and being able to add value. So you're coming in and not picking up property has no cash flow. And we've been going through a couple of landscape hotels where you kind of sit on it for a year, while you're waiting for permits and all the rest to get through. When you're starting a project on the construction, how are you dealing with, construction has design and permitting phase, and then you're going to have a construction period. How are you usually advising people to handle that long period before you get to cash flow versus a cash flowing property that you just pick up and go?
Yeah,
even though there's benefits down the road. Yeah,
absolutely. So that's where I call that's the value add. That's why we make more money than just a turnkey property, is because we eat that, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months, we eat that time period that you're alluding to. But you're absolutely right. We have to budget for the construction phase. We call it a burn rate. So that burn rate, whatever you owe to service that loan, you got to cover that every single month on top of the expenses of the labor, the materials that you're putting into the property. So a lot of people think when they first start working with us, they think that, I've got $150,000 and I want to put it all into this property. And what they forget is you've got a burn rate of 6 months to get it up and going. And so automatically we take away $50,000, earmark it for loan servicing, taxes, whatever it is, unknowns, unforeseen. So we don't have 150, we only have 100. So we always want to understand really our constraints first. That's the first and most important thing. And then we do go through the permitting, the zoning, the permits. That's number one. Everything that we do not go underboard. We don't go under the table, meaning that everything that we do, the containers, the domes, everything is permitted, built to code, because a big piece of our value is actually in the market value of the property. And you have no market value, you do things out of code, you do things without permits. In some counties, some areas, they'll actually ask you to tear it down. Then we go zoning and permits. We have the budget. And then we start working with contractors or GC to make sure that we can adhere to our budget, 100,000, 80,000, whatever that may be. We make sure that we double, triple check that it's going to meet within our timeline. So what I always tell folks is expect it to take 2 times longer. So if you've budgeted 2 months, just expect 4 months. That's it. And then on a conservative side, expect to have a 25% premium. So if you budgeted 100,000, just expect that you're going to spend 125. And then that makes things a lot easier in the back end, because I don't think I've been a part of a project, maybe 1 or 2 really small projects. I've never seen anything come under budget or under time. Everything always goes over. There's just unforeseen things, especially in rehabs or remodels. And then the last piece is what we call the fun or sexy piece, is the design, launch, and operation side of getting the Airbnb up and going, because you're so close to cash flowing, right? That's where we actually get to work with our designers, our architects, and we actually get to kind of piece together what we call the story of the property, or in business terms, the branding of the property, and then how we're targeting that demographic and how do we outperform our competitors in the market. But yeah, those are the phases that we go through. But the key piece is understanding our burn rate and how much time we need. And so if you've worked with me closely, I'm a big stickler on making sure that if we have 6 months, that's it. The hard cutoff is 6 months. And we got to do everything to make sure that we get everything done within 6 months. Actually, probably 4 months, giving us a 2-month cushion. So
I mean, every project timeline is probably different. I'm sure that, your home build out, house hack, is taking a lot longer than a project that you may be approaching, like the one you're doing with Rob, where you're purchasing it and then putting in, 10 additional units for a project like that, like 10 unit plus 10. What are you guys budgeting to get in, design it, construct it, stabilize it? What's something like that look like for you
Yeah,
guys?
we're breaking it off into phases, and so we it literally just closed last week. So, but today's Thursday, so we closed a week ago. So right now we're going in there trying to learn the systems because we're learning how to run something of this size in terms of direct bookings. I believe 60% plus come through direct bookings, and we just have not worked at that scale of working with the website, the marketing, the funnels, everything like that. We're familiar with those, we're just not familiar with it at this scale. So getting used to that first. Um, we always want to make sure that we don't hurt the business once we start going into it. We want to optimize it. So that's the first thing, is make sure that we optimize and understand the systems and understand the staff. Key thing. Then we're going to break out the phases because there's already 10 sites that are already permitted, ready to go. Basically, utilities are pulled. We just need to build whatever it is. And we need to figure out what we want to do there. So our numbers are going to be a little bit different because we don't need to run the utilities and we don't need to get the permits and wait for the inspections and everything. So just understand that. But really at each one, we do what we call prototyping, rapid prototyping. And so this place can actually expand even further than just the 23 units. We can probably expand upwards of close to maybe 40, depending on how we lay it out. And so what we're doing is we're experimenting with an Airstream, and we're going to do what we call premium RV sites. We're going to experiment. We're getting rid of, we got 4 domes going in, but that's just because we already have those in stock or in inventory. But we're going to be moving away from domes. This just doesn't make much sense in the Texas heat. And I can talk more about that too. And then start exploring how to build out the rest of, that's 6 other sites in other phases once we understand what's working well for us. And so we don't want to do them all at one time, but we're budgeting approximately 100,000 to 200,000, depending on the size and the structure of the units for each pad.
How are you figuring out? We just went through this exercise with Landscape Hotel down in Texas, and there is a wide variety of costs that you can spend per unit. We just did one up here in Colorado, Lost Fork Base Camp, and those were about 100, 120,000 a unit. We had Ben Wolf on the show, who's doing Onera down there. I think they're spending up close to 300,000-400,000 on some of these really cool, unique stays. How are you figuring out like what the investment makes sense per unit on the high end, on the low end to get the returns?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question. And I know with you and Amy, we're probably working on something very similar. So I come from a finance and engineering background. It always comes back down to 2 numbers for me. It's break even. How soon can all the expenses of the new site or the new pad space, whatever you want to call the property, how quickly can we take care of the monthly expenses for it? Okay. What we call the monthly nut. That's number 1. And then number 2 is how quickly can we get payback on the on that unit or on that space. So how quickly can we get our initial sunk investment back? So in terms of, if we're looking at an area at this point in time, we're very familiar with the demographic, we're familiar with the comps, we're familiar with what's generating out there. So we know approximately how much each unit is going to make for us. Now, we have a margin of error probably between 10 to 15%, just because, there's swings in the market. But what really helps us dictate between spending $500,000 versus $100,000 is the payback period. And so typically speaking, I like to see a payback period within 2 to 3 years. The shorter it is, the better. So if I see the payback period, I'm going to an extreme just to serve as an example. If I get a payback period on my sunk investment within 8 months, I'm like, okay, dude, this is spitting out crazy cash. I might want to invest a little bit more so we can expand it, make it even better, maybe create more top line revenue, have the payback period go out to 2 years, right? Versus, let's go to the other side of the spectrum. Let's say that my payback period on my sunk investment is like 7 or 8 years. Well, now I know something about the demographic. I'm probably overbuilding for this area. I'm going to try to figure out, taper it down. What do I need to spend to get to 3 years? And maybe that is not 500,000. Maybe that's $200,000. So that's how I figure out my cap in markets and what I do. And that's the same thing from brand new construction, new pads, or even going into remodels. So right now with the remodels or the rehabs that we're doing, we're always constrained by what's my payback period. And my little kind of golden magic area is between 2 to 3 years.
And that's the cash that you're putting in. That's not necessarily the construction loan on the project, right?
Correct. Yes, that's the construction, and then the break even. So if we really want to get in numbers here, so the break even is going to be, let's use an arbitrary number. Let's say that for one of these units, let's say that the monthly nut is $1,500 a month, right? We already own the land. It's separate. This is just for that one unit. It's $1,500 a month. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to find what we call the runway is the difference between what the comps and what we believe with a high level of confidence of what that property is going to be able to generate. So let's say that we believe with all the comps, our full analysis is going to be able to generate us $5,000 a month, and we know that our break even is $1,500 a month. That's a relatively large runway for that one door. $3,500, right? Now let's go to the other place. Let's play the other side. Let's say that we do, and we actually just did this as an example in class last night. Let's say that our break even is $1,500 and that we can generate maybe $2,000 and $2,200 a month on that property based off all of our comps, our analysis, everything like that. That's such a small margin of error. That's like 2 cleaning fees basically, right? So that's really dangerous. That's a dangerous situation. I should say dangerous. That's a risky situation for us to be in. And so therefore I would either say, how do we reduce our monthly nut? How do we reduce our sunk investment? Or in most cases, what I do, if it's that close, that runway is that small, I just walk away from the deal, or we pivot to a different strategy.
Yeah. What do you think in this, like going back to your like 2 to 3 year payback? Mm-hmm. What do you think is a good sustainable growth scale for investors in this type of market to expect or to work towards? I think a lot of people get door envy, where we talk about, yeah. Hey, I got 50 doors, and we're like, how do we ever keep up? Amy and I, we've just been working consistently and slowly, and we're going from one project to the next. Mm-hmm. But as you put your money in, let's say you got a couple $100,000, you put it into a project, maybe it's 2 to 3 years to get it out.
Yep.
And then maybe you go do the next project. Do you advise people taking that kind of path of like, put it in, wait for it to come out? Or do you really lean towards the money, love, speed, and to get it in, get it back out? Like, what do you think's realistic and sustainable that people should be considering as they're getting into full-time investment into hospitality?
That's such a great question. It is so personality and character driven, because I'll say, to headline it, I'm more of what you said is more of the slow and steady. And I'll talk more about that here in a second. I have very successful friends, and I've been involved in startups. The name of the game is hit when the iron's hot and move as fast as possible, borrow, get as much money as possible, and build, even if you're negative cash flow. And then you get to a point where you have this huge valuation and you exit or you go public or something like that, right? There's 2 sides of it. And some people love being able to tout that I have, 1,300 doors. I have 150 doors. I have 200. I've never gotten to door envy. Well, I look at a couple things differently. So one, I do this because I want to have a good lifestyle and I want to live a healthy life and travel and be with my friends and be with my family members. And a lot of times when you have 1,500 doors or more, you become tied to that business. You work inside the business, you work for the business. So I've always tried to separate myself. And that, again, that's completely a personality, subjective thing. At the end of the day, though, what we found is, so I mentioned earlier on that we did between like 10 to 12 doors. It fluctuated because we had new ones coming on a contract. We were selling ones and then we were buying new ones. But it was around 10 to 12 doors. And then right now between Rob and I think Rob's selling quite a few. We had like 41, 42 doors total. But I will say that, one door of ours, I'm trying to think of a handful of them. It can outproduce somewhere between, on the low side, 8, on the high side of 20 plus LTR doors. And so that's because the cash flow is just so amazing. Like, so this space right here, this is my new studio space. You can't see the rest of it. This is about 650 square feet. It cost me $18,000 to build, and about maybe $7,000-8,000, maybe a little bit more to furnish. It was under $30,000 all said and done. This thing generates used to generate around $40,000 a year for me. And it boosted the equity of the property by about approximately $300,000. So I invested $20,000, let's just call it $30,000. It spits out $40,000 every single year, and it boosted the equity by $300,000. So I would say do things that matches your speed and your financial discipline is what I'd say. Some of my startup VC buddies and friends, they can move super fast and they're okay working in their business. And that's great. They make a lot of money, and financially, they're far more financially successful than I am. And for other people, they like to go that kind of that turtle pace where it's just like slow and consistent, but every year you get a new property, that property cash flows, you build a ton of equity. And then pretty soon by the time you're 30 or 40 or 50, you've got maybe 10 or 12 super high cash flowing properties that probably equate to in the tens of millions of dollars. And that's more of my pathway.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to choose your path. I just be careful not to outgrow your capabilities and don't over leverage yourself. And the reason why I lean towards a slow and steady is because I don't want to say it's less risky, but you're less likely to get ahead of your skis. Whereas you can really quickly over leverage yourself and be in a lot of trouble with so many doors. And that's a whole nother problem.
I always kind of look at real estate as there's kind of this sliding level of passive income in it, and it can become more active if you're in it, you're managing it, and that's where you're earning your day-to-day income from, maybe it's being the short-term rental host for versus a little bit more passive down the scale. If you're hiring out an operator, you're growing the equity and you're taking less involvement, but maybe you're earning income in another category. We do that in our architecture and real estate. I assume you guys probably do that in some of your coaching, that active versus passive. And that changes, I think, the amount of speed that you're going to be putting into building up a portfolio. If it's more passive, it may be a little bit slower, and that's where we have tended to put things down. But I like getting in. If you're interested in real estate, getting involved in the category of real estate, whether it's being a realtor, an architect, builder, and in the same way that you're getting experience buying a whole bunch of projects, you end up getting the experience by working with other clients and seeing the process and just learning, and maybe there's opportunities to get in and involved. How have you set your scale of getting involved in projects and learning and scratching that itch versus where you invest?
Yeah, I'm kind of what's the word? What's the word when you kind of like to put yourself through the paces? You like the pain.
Yeah.
So I come from
glutton for pain.
Yeah, there you go. I grew up playing sports. I got really into individual sports, and so one of the things is that I learned to like being uncomfortable. What my coach called it is being comfortable in the uncomfortable, and I got really comfortable with it. I really enjoyed it. So I in a weird, strange, probably barbaric way, is I enjoy pain when I know it leads to growth. And so what that means is that nowadays I don't, I mean, I'm looking at my hands because I was laughing at it. I hurt my hands, and you can see this right here. I cut myself. I was in Austin, and I cut myself working outside on the pool. I had fixed the generator. But with that all said, is I like to learn. And when I say I like to learn, the people that I found that make the most money, or that can have I don't want to say the ease of time of growing their business, are the folks that can get to the ground level. This is the same thing in business. Is a lot of people, they think about being in the ivory tower, being the CEO, being the founder, investor, whatever it is. And what happens is that you get disconnected with what's happening on the ground level. And one thing that I've always learned, just coming up from a very modest background, is that you shouldn't lose touch with that. And so still to this day, I'll go over there. I'm helping my electricians today. I'll pull wire. I'll probably cut some siding. My painters are there right now too. I don't think I'm going to do any painting today, but like I still get into the trenches and work with the guys. And I like doing that because one, again, I like pain and I like being able to grow. But two is I get to learn a lot. And from that, I can build an entire house from the ground up by myself. Is it ideal? No. Is it the best use of my time? Absolutely not. But what that means is at the time when I've got multiple projects going on, and for example, over in Austin, one of my projects, an electrician called me on Tuesday and she's like, hey, you got guests inside that house. We got no water. We've got no power. We have no internet. We don't know what's going on. And they were there for 12 hours until 9 o'clock. After 9, I think it was like 9:15 when they finally left the property in the evening. Ultimately, at the end of the day, how we solved that problem was me going back and forth with electricians. Like, did you try this? Did you do this? What's happening here? And what that did is not only did it save me him just leaving and then me trying to figure out like, oh my gosh, I have to call my well guy. I got to figure out my pump. Oh my gosh, I have back-to-back guests coming. I got to cancel 3 reservations. Instead, we were able to figure it out that very evening because I have the experience that I built up over 22 years. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs to become a master electrician. Nobody needs to become a master plumber, but learning the process and being in the weeds, especially in the beginning. I think it's so important for a lot of folks, especially if you don't have a lot of money, is to learn the trades to, in the very least, that you can do some of the basic stuff. But, you know, in the best case scenario, save yourself tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in the long run by being able to troubleshoot and then manage your teams too. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but
It does. And, it speaks to my heart too. Like, I think the trades are getting so pushed out that a lot of the generation coming up, really just doesn't have much of a clue on how to do things. The guys that are on the backside are kind of aging out, and there's not enough people to hand things up. So that has increased the value of just knowing how to do stuff.
Yeah.
Now, I've seen that a lot kind of in the white collar world as an architect. We were told to go to college, get a good job, and you came out and everybody had done that, and nobody knew how to build or do things.
Yeah.
I remember growing up, my father, he was a manager of all these camps around East Texas, and he would drive into Dallas every day, kind of a white collar job. And he always kept in the back of his truck some tools and, just another blue collar. And I started working for him as a property manager, maintaining some of the campgrounds. And, I always liked how he'd show up at the camp, he'd change his shirt, and then he'd, after meeting with everybody at the, big meetings in Dallas, he put on a work shirt, and we come change toilets or fix the septic line or whatever needed to be done. Yeah. And that ability to be able to just pivot back and forth, there's kind of a mindset of like, oh, this is a lower category skill than this. And maybe it is on $1 per hour, but I think the reality of understanding what needs to get done and be able to communicate that to all of the trades that are actually getting things done. One is hugely valuable, but two, the cost of all the trades have become very
100%. 100%. I think it reminds me of, I'm going to butcher this saying, but I used to be, my friends used to joke with me that I was a jack of all trades. And then I learned that it was the actual quote was, jack of all trades, master of none is better than a master of one. And so over time, I really embraced that as part of my identity. And you're absolutely 100% right, Zeke, is that I actually think today in 2025, if any younger kids, high schoolers, college students, even who are watching and listening to this right now, speaking from a guy from multiple degrees, one of my startups was actually in the higher education. I understand the higher education world fairly well. And I will say the fastest way to get to 6-figure salary or 6-figure income is to go into blue collar trade. Welding, electrician, plumber, HVAC, septic systems. I can almost promise you, I know what my guys make. They get paid very, very well. If you want to go into 7 figures, go own one of those businesses. Exactly. It will make you more money than getting a business degree or even an engineering degree today. And I say that as a business student and a business graduate and an engineering student and an engineering graduate as well. I have electrician friends making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year. I have electrician buddies that own the businesses making 7 figures. But yeah, you're absolutely right. So like, even if you don't want to do that, that's fine. But just keep this in mind. To get my electrician to come out, just to drive out, it costs me about $200 just for him to drive out. For him to spend for every hour that he's there, it's $125, not even for him, but for one of his guys. Okay, so to put up a light fixture, to rewire a light switch, or to do something like that, it's going to cost you about $500. Or you can do it in 15 minutes.
It's cheaper to hire my engineer to fix the electrical now.
Exactly. That's exactly it. You're 100% right. My structural engineer, it's funny because the way that you say that, I pay about maybe $2,000 to $3,000 for my structural engineer. I pay my electricians $20,000 plus to do my house.
We've got 2 boys, 16 and 19, and it's been top of our mind as we've been kind of looking to, what does the future look like for their generation? So we're advocates of it. I think both from that generation, plus just if you're in it and you're building long-term wealth, just understanding what it is that you're actually touching and beyond the spreadsheets and the numbers, and get down and get your hands dirty makes a lot of difference.
100%.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the biggest mistakes then that people hopping in from who've read Rich Dad Poor Dad or some other get rich real estate book, that are coming in are making that, aren't coming from the trades up? And what are the things to watch out for?
Oh man, I say this with not trying to pick on people because I know I've made this mistake and we've coached a lot of people around this mistake is not having FOMO, fear of missing out, because you see everybody else making money. You're like, oh my gosh, I got to jump into STRs and it's way better than LTRs. And what they end up doing is they buy the wrong property or they execute it in the wrong way. And what I mean by that is not understanding the demographic, the numbers. I was speaking of spreadsheets, and they don't understand their demographic. It's easy to think that you can just post or put up a listing on Airbnb and all of a sudden it's going to start making you money. But the numbers and the evidence is that that's not true. We are literally buying properties that are not cash flow producing because it was not executed in the right way. They overpaid for it. Like the property that I just purchased, they way overpaid for it in 2019. And I paid less than what they paid for in 2019 and 2025, sorry. And I think if I had to headline it, it would be not understanding their customer and then not adding the value into it. They just try to, like what we are talking about earlier, they try to just make it turnkey. So put in a couple of furniture, paint a few walls, and then they try to list it. So it's building off that story and understanding who your core demographic is and targeting that demographic as best as you possibly can. Study your competitors, study the comps, see the ones that you have so much data on who's actually making money in the marketplace. Understand how they're catering to their demographic, understand who's coming into that space, and then design your space around it. Don't just put up white walls and a new couch in there thinking that you're going to make six figures, right? And you've seen this inside our community. The way that we design our properties, it's so specific to a very particular demographic that we've actually researched. We're not trying to be all things to all people. If we're trying to target young couples between 25 and 35 years old that are hikers, guess what? That cabin or that dome or that container is geared, designed, and painted for that demographic so that they will choose us over the other 80, 90% of the marketplace that is just trying to geared to all people. And that's what you see where the ones that are making like what? Domes making $300, $400, $500, $600 a night. You see cabins going, small cabins, 2-bedroom cabins going for $1,000 a night. I mean, I don't have anything like that in my personal portfolio yet, but I mean, like those are in locations that are good and they have a target demographic. And then being realistic with the design and construction side of things. A lot of people think that, and I don't blame them, that they're actually right in a lot of ways. Like, hey, for me to build equity, I need to have like a big kitchen. I need to have like marble countertops. I need to have this grand entryway, and I need a really good landscaping with a really beautiful lawn. They're thinking kind of like old school traditional real estate. Whereas when we start talking, when we start working with them, and I know you have a treehouse, and when you start building that story, you're like, well, instead of spending $100,000 on a pool, what if you built and designed a really cozy reading nook with really great lighting, a beautiful bookshelf, and a great seating area, right? And you literally build a nook just for reading and coffee. Okay. And then if this space is for kids, why don't you build out like a really great kids room so that when the parents or the adults are cooking, they can still keep an eye on the kids, but the kids, they can paint, they can draw, they can color, they can play video games, they can do puzzles, they can read kids' books. And you have that corner right over there designed perfectly for kids, right? And it's designed really well that it looks also like it belongs in Architectural Digest. When you start putting that together and you look at the nook for the little reading nook, and then you look at the area for the kids, all of a sudden you don't need to spend $100,000. You spend more time actually picking out the design, and it might cost you maybe $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 to actually build that out. And that actually generates even more money than if you spent, $15,000, $20,000 on a lawn or, all new siding or something like that. But I think not understanding that there's little things in the design practice that can actually net you even more money and a better return than thinking the traditional way. So it's kind of a shift, it's a paradigm shift in how we look at properties and look at deals.
I love this idea of this return on investment or return on design. One thing I think you alluded to is a lot of people are coming into short-term rentals from the traditional real estate side, where you may need to, always have a backup of, hey, I'm going to be able to convert this into a long-term rental. I'm going to be able to, turn around and sell it. And that affects your design decisions versus going all in. Am I creating a hotel experience or hospitality experience? When people design a hotel, they're very specific. I'm designing this for a guest experience that's committed to that hospitality guest that's coming there. When people design short-term rentals oftentimes are looking at it and thinking, well, if this doesn't work, then I can always turn around and sell it. Some decisions that might work really well on the short-term rental side, it might be tree houses and domes and these unique shipping containers. That may not turn around for a single family resident and work as well to be able to sell it. How do you balance that? Do you say burn the ships and go all in and create a hospitality experience that's on a cap rate, or do you say don't overdo this so that if you need to sell, you can always sell?
Yeah, that's such a good question, Zeke. It comes down again to demographic and location, kind of like everything that real estate comes down to. Very rarely do I tell people to burn the ships because, naturally I'm a little bit more conservative too, especially when it comes to finances. I want safety nets. Now, I will design first for the customer, but I'm not going to hurt my equity because of my guest, right? My short, we'll call it short-term goal. I'm not going to hurt my equity. So the project that we have going on right now in Portland, the house that we're doing is we're designing it for both. So we have I was using a real example, the reading nook, but the reading nook, the way that we designed it with the fireplace is also going to build us equity. Right now, that doesn't mean that we're going to do some things in there that we probably take out or repaint if we ever decided to sell it or list it for long-term rentals or to sell it. It just doesn't match the tone in the field, and we can easily swap that out. But I'm not going to do like, I've seen some people, they put like grass, fake grass on the wall, or they do like these really extreme maximalist type of stuff, which I'm not opposed to it. They go more burn the ship. They paint the whole, talking to my business partner right now, they paint the whole house hot pink, right? I'm like, hey man, that's great. You're making great money now. I think that hurt your value in the long run in terms of equity. And if you ever need to repaint the entire house, you're looking at like probably $20,000-$25,000, maybe even more, to redo the whole house.
We literally just did a hotel, like a conversion of 10 rooms, and it's two gay guys. And they painted the whole thing hot pink. And I'm just like, I guess that fits your marketel.
Yeah.
Probably not going on my portfolio. But.
Right. Now, I tell people, like, depending on the market, right? So if I'm inside the middle of Portland or middle of Austin or Chicago or whatever, name the city, I'm going to try to cater to 3 different audiences. I'm going to try to cater to my guest who I'm trying to target. So that's short term. I'm also going to try to target future buyers. Super important. In business, the one thing that you learn is you always need an exit plan, right? And if you don't have any buyers, you do not have an exit plan. And the last one are your banks and your appraisers. If you do not have those 3 customers in mind when you're designing or building out a place, you're shorting yourself. You're not doing yourself any type of service, because what you're going to do, you might be satisfying the younger you, but you've hurt the older you, or you're hurting yourself in the future when you can't sell it or you sell it at a loss. And there will be people like myself or other investors who will come and pay you fair market value, but you will eat that loss. So what I'd say is, like, understand the market. So a good example is we have a couple clients down in East Texas, Marfa and I always mispronounce this name of the city, Turalingua, I think it's how you pronounce it. They're vacation markets right next to Big Bend National Park. Beautiful, beautiful area. A lot of people vacation there. Nobody lives there though. Nobody lives there. So if you're building something that nobody's going to ever buy other than an investment, and nobody's actually going to live there, you can build as crazy as you want. It's unrestricted land. There's hardly people even follow building codes down there. But what I tell them is that just understand that you're getting into a project that you're not generating equity. Just assume that whatever money that you're putting into this property, you will never be able to get back. You need to make that assumption to make sure that you're okay with this decision to move forward. Because banks will not lend on this unless you build out like a legit commercial campground or landscape hotel, and you can actually get a cap rate applied to it. And then 2, it's like your only investors are other people who want to buy short-term rental that are willing to pay you your price. So in that situation, when you do burn the boats, my thing goes back to payback period. How quickly can I recoup my initial sunk investment if I'm going into something hyper unique? So if you guys look on, like, I think I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here, but if you guys looked at, remember on Airbnb just last year when they're really pushing, what was it? Not Wild. What were their unique stays? Like Mother Goose's Boot, Shrek's House, all that stuff.
Yeah, the potato,
the potato, all that stuff. Yeah. It's like, that's awesome. Make sure you get your money back in a year. And then you just be cash flowing. And then once you're done and you made your money back, then you're cash flowing with no risk because you already paid yourself back. The problem is that people who have loans on it, and it's a 5, 6, 7 year payback period. And then all of a sudden they try to sell their plane that has been turned into Airbnb, their train that's on rusted track that they're trying to sell and nobody wants to buy it. I mean, that's the time. That's the place where I think people make mistakes. They try to go too unique. You did a great example in Washington, actually, of the Jurassic Park home. Wild, went viral all over the place, right? And then somebody bought it. Actually, it was an investment company that bought it for like 1.2 million. Last time I saw, they're trying to sell it for like 800,000 or 700,000. Nobody will buy it. It's been listed for over a year now. So be careful of going too unique.
Yeah. What about on, back to like the landscape hotel or the land hack, where you're smaller than a hotel, something that's less than, say 20, 30 units that has, there's probably a decent buyer pool in that, traditional hotel market. And this category of small campground, glampground, is there a pool of investors coming up to purchase those? Who are our buyers that we're building these for? I mean, is it us in 10 years? I mean, you think or is there groups in there that, smaller branches of Marriott's that are branding these things and purchasing them? Like what's the buyout?
Yeah. So for those, there's a lot of wealthy individuals who need to park their money in real estate. This is what we tend to see. So they need something, and I'll make this very clear, is that if you are going in commercial space, whether campground, landscape hotels, resorts, micro resorts, whatever it may be, under 30 doors, most of these investors, for you to get premium, they do not want to do the work. What that means is that you need to have systems in place and you need to have clean books. Too often do I see, a lot of times, because we're helping clients negotiate and buy these properties that you're talking about. And most of the time, I'd say 80-90% of the time, it's mom and pop without clean books. And they're like, oh yeah, my car payment's in there. Oh yeah, our dinners are in there. Oh yeah, we have everything's mixed together. Oh yeah, my daughter works, so her salary's not in there because we pay her under the table. So you're not going to be able to sell to a high profile investor or even just a savvy investor. But that market, that pool is usually people who need to expand their portfolio. They usually have a lot more money kind of burning a hole in their pocket, and they need to get that 7-8% return, and they just do it very passively. You might be able to get somebody who's more like us, who's like, hey, you know what? I want to be, I don't have $50 million burning a hole in my pocket, but I want to build something where I can cash flow, build out a retirement plan, pass on to my kids. You'll get some of those folks too. What we're noticing though now is that there's a lot of PE, private equity companies and firms out there that are going out and buying these up, and they're grouping them together, and then they're selling out at a larger multiple. Or you even get a case in some situations where you have a buyout from like a larger company, like I don't think Wander has bought anything, but there's like Getaway. There's another one that I'm forgetting right now that was a really popular one with the Airstreams that went out and bought a lot of these properties to fold into their portfolio.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely the investment, and the PE market is definitely smaller. But if you have cash flow, or it should be cash flow, it's net profits, net operating income. You have high net operating income with relatively high margins. You have clean books, and you have systems in place. People are going to want to buy you. There's always going to be investors, especially in the United States. There's going to be somebody who needs to park their money or buy real estate for tax purposes, and they want those nice, clean properties. That's why campgrounds and RV parks are so popular. Mobile parks were really, really popular, still popular today, but really popular about a decade ago.
Yeah. So if you had $1 million today, where would you go spend it, and what would you build it on?
Oh man, I'm gonna give away some secrets here, but I want do it. You guys should do it. If I had $1 million right now that I had to go and I didn't have any projects or any of my businesses right now running, I would go and invest in building RV sites, premium RV sites. I would go and find where they're basically, I don't want to say they're recession proof, but I mean, they're just so nice and steady. I would find a location that has 2 peak seasons. I'd have a summer season and then obviously a winter season. So think about ski towns, avoid beaches and lakes. And I would find a main road tripping corridor. So on the East Coast, think about where the national and all the state parks are, right over there. On the West Coast, think about the 101 the 101 highway along the coast, or I-5. And I would find a place where there's already a strong number of RV parks, and I would park somewhere. I'd find a place somewhere near there or in between them. And then what I would do is I would design not just concrete pads. I would design what I call premium or high-end RV pads. We actually have a member that did what we were talking about and decided to go all in on it. And he's now completely booked out through September and getting $250 to $300 a night on one pad.
Wow.
Yeah. So
And your cost to build that pad, I guarantee, is far less than, you know.
1,000. So he's basically going to be he's going to hit payback in less than a year.
I'll send you this Lost Fork campground that we just did. So we did 9 RVs and 9 cabins, and so we've got both of them kind of in the test market to see how they do. And it just opened up this about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, cool.
And you know, I was talking to a client on it. He's like, "Yeah, it's crushing. You know, like we're booked out for the next 2 months. They're getting $350 a night, so they're super excited. They're kind of right in that category you're talking about." You know, we've got a little string of maybe some future tree houses that we'll do on it, but the RV site, you know, is what he's the most excited about because, you know, it was the least cost or highest return.
Yep, that's exactly what. So that's what I'm going to try to talk Rob into doing more of on that property out in Fredericksburg, out in Hill Country, Texas. But yeah, if I do it, it's such low maintenance. You don't really need to have a big crew. There's hardly any cleaning because, like I said, it's not a house. It's a pad with obviously a lot of amenities around there, but it's a lot less maintenance than a house. And doing sheets, linens, bathroom, like all that is out the door. You don't need to do it, and you get close to the same price, $250, $300 a night. That's good money.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, if you were to go back and you were to tell, you know, Kai Andrews, you know, 20-year-old self, what would you tell him to do different, do the same?
Man, if I could go back in time and tell myself, what would I say? You know, funny enough, I would say I was too conservative when I was younger and I was too afraid of finding the right deal and timing the market. I'm talking to 21, 22-year-old Kai here. I would say run the numbers, run the deal, understand the customer, pull the trigger. Once that one hits, adjust, recalibrate, do it again as fast as possible. What I did is I was too nervous and I was, I was naive and just didn't have the experience that I have now. And so if I could go back in time, I was like, trust the numbers. And then even if your numbers are wrong or even if they're correct, you need to recalibrate and hit it again. And if you're in real estate, you have to understand that you're in it for the long run. It's really nerve wracking when markets go up and down, 2008, 2020, obviously. And you see money going up and down in terms of equity and valuation. We're playing the long game here. It's real estate. I'm playing for 10, 20, 30, 40 plus years, and I'm passing it on to the next generation. So I know in 20, 30 years, all of my properties are going to be worth significantly more. I don't care what's going to happen. If the market goes through the recession, that's fine. I'm going to go buy. If the market goes to the peak, I'm going to keep buying because the deal, if the numbers make sense now, it should make sense in 5 years. It should make sense in 10 years. It just might not make sense tomorrow.
Love it. Love it. Building a legacy. I appreciate all the gift that you're giving to the community of that kind of mindset and thinking through it. Yeah, if people want to connect with you, Kai, where's the best place for them to get in touch and see the work you're doing?
Yeah, you can check out my YouTube channel, Andrew. I'm trying to balance making videos, but I'm putting a video out like once every 2 weeks, every 10 days or so. And then you can also hit me up on Instagram where I have videos and give you guys updates on my projects too. You can hit me on Instagram at Kai J Andrew.
Love it. Yeah. Thanks so much, Kai. I appreciate your time. It was great to get to spend some time chatting with you.
Of course.